Ahsoka? What troubles you? I am always walking by your side.
Citizens of the glorious Empire, I have returned. I took an oath to protect the Empire. I therefore declare war on the Rebel Alliance.
I had a vision.
What did you see?
More and more danger than I thought.
Baylan claimed to have knowledge of a power.
Master!
One that could end wars.
A long time ago, I walked away from the Jedi.
This is your trial, Ahsoka. Take your time to decide. Are you a Jedi? Or not?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Star Wars dropped the Ahsoka Season 2 trailer at D23. There's a bunch of Easter eggs here. There's a lot that they don't put in the trailer that we know is probably going to be in the season, but there is a lot of stuff they included in this, particularly Anakin Skywalker and young Ahsoka again for more Clone Wars flashbacks. They're almost giving us a live-action Clone Wars series, so we will break it all down. Part of me is also hoping that Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up during these Clone Wars flashbacks because there have been rumors that Obi-Wan Kenobi will also show up this season. Pointing at you, Dave Filoni, it would be a crime to bring them back for Clone Wars flashbacks and not let Ewan McGregor also come back as Obi-Wan Kenobi for some of those scenes. Most important thing, the series is dropping episodes starting January 20th. It's 8 episodes again, so we don't have to wait that long, like they're not waiting that deep into 2027 to release this. But it'll be the last live-action TV series for a good long while in the Star Wars universe, because the Star Wars people said there will eventually be more live-action series, but Disney completely deprioritized their big-budget live-action stuff from both Marvel and Star Wars. Now it seems like they don't really care about Disney Plus that much, and they're prioritizing theatrical releases, so that's why a lot of stuff that used to be TV series is now being shifted to the movies or being folded into movies. The Mandalorian and Grogu is the latest example of that happening, which is one of the reasons why the Mandalorian and Grogu movie just felt like a long episode of the Mandalorian series. So it kind of seems like based on this trailer, Dave Filoni is trying to wrap up all this Thrawn plot as much as possible because originally he was working on a Thrawn crossover movie that was meant to be sort of the Avengers Endgame movie collecting all these different parts of the Mando timeline with all the different characters from the different series that are all in the same time crossing over to battle Thrawn. Then he took over Kathleen Kennedy's job as the Kevin Feige of Star Wars, and they postponed that Thrawn movie because he just didn't have time to work on it. And it kind of sounds like they're waiting to see how the Star Wars Starfighter movie with Ryan Gosling does is take place later in the timeline after the sequel trilogy to see whether or not they want to completely shift their attention in the movies to that later part of the timeline, like the Ryan Gosling part of the timeline after the sequel trilogy, or if they want to spend way more time in the movies during the Mando part of the timeline, because a lot of the Mando characters like Grogu, Mando, still very, very popular, so they don't want to completely bail on this part of the timeline, but because they're so focused on the movies, they're just looking for like big hits. So it's one of those situations where they're just kind of waiting to see what the most popular part of the timeline winds up being, and then they'll just focus all their attention on that and then do animated stuff during the other parts of the timeline. They'll still be animated TV series though.
What about the hunt for Ben Solo?
You know, someone was going to ask me that in this line. I'm surprised it took this long, so that's really cool, you know. So, but, you know, we're not making that picture right now. That's all I can say.
So everybody enjoy Ahsoka Season 2 because it might be a little while before we see these characters come back. But we'll eventually see most of them come back, the ones that are still alive. They start the trailer with a bunch of U-Wings heading to what seems like Dathomir just based on the red color coding. There's a lot of Dathomir during this trailer because that's the last place we saw Thrawn. That was where he's using his base to marshal all of his forces, the Imperial Remnant, the Night Sisters, the Night Troopers, and just everything else that he was doing to mass his army to fight the New Republic. So a lot of shit is going down on Dathomir this season. But they also start the trailer, most importantly, with Anakin Skywalker talking to Ahsoka. What troubles you, Ahsoka? What troubles you, my Padawan? Based on the fact that there's a little bit of reverb in his voice, I think it's meant to be Force Ghost Anakin talking to older Ahsoka in the voiceover though, but they cut it with the flashback scene of them during the Clone Wars on the ice planet. So if you're just hearing Anakin's voice and you're not sure which part of the timeline they're in, I think the easy way to decide where he is based on how much reverb is in his voice. Then this first scene of the battle is meant to be on Dathomir. You notice all these graves here are probably of Night Sisters that they buried in the ground, or other Night Troopers too. There's a lot of people that are being raised from the dead with the Night Sisters magic. But you know it's present day because the New Republic are wearing their modern suits while they're fighting the Night Troopers in the background, and you also see a couple of energy bows, so you know the Night Sisters are back too in this. That was one of the ideas at the end of Ahsoka Season 1, is that all the people in the caskets were dead Night Troopers, like dead Stormtroopers that had died they were going to raise as Night Troopers, and dead Night Sisters that they were ferrying for the Night Mothers to the main galaxy. That was part of Thrawn's deal, is that he made a bargain with them. Night Sisters, I've come to bargain. In exchange for their power and their use of the Force, Thrawn wanted to use their power. He had to help them make it back with all the Night Sisters in the other galaxy to the main galaxy. Basically, the Night Sisters trying to reassert control over the main galaxy, because the way they pitched it in Ahsoka, in ancient history, they controlled this other Peridia galaxy, but something terrible happened to their empire there, the ancient empire of the Dathmiri. My early assumption is that they meddled with the dark side of the Force too much, and it wound up biting them in the ass in a big way. But in that ancient history, they'd established outposts and places inside the main galaxy, like this route was their route that they used with the space whales. So it means that hundreds of thousands of years ago, the Night Sisters' culture, their empire, also controlled the main galaxy too. So all the Night Sisters from hundreds of thousands of years ago that are dead can still communicate with the Night Sisters in present day. They're all sort of collectively trying to reassert control over this main galaxy eventually. So it's one of those situations where the Night Sisters don't really care about Thrawn or the Empire coming back, but they need his help to bring their Empire back, and Thrawn is doing the same thing, using them. He doesn't really care about the Night Sisters coming back, he just wants the Empire to be supreme again. And the way they edit the trailer, older Force Ghost Anakin talks to older Ahsoka, saying, "What troubles you?" as we see the flashback to younger Padawan Ahsoka in her snow gear from Clone Wars Season 1 with younger Anakin during the Clone Wars, seeing all these dead clone troopers around them, being killed by the Night Brother that they wind up fighting 2-on-1 later. Because her snow gear is the same outfit she was wearing during Clone Wars Season 1 Episode 15 Trespass, there are a lot of people that wondered if this is specifically meant to be the events of that episode, but there was no Night Brother in that episode, so this might just be on another snow planet. The original snow planet they were on in that episode was called Orto Plutonia. They helped mediate a fight between the locals and the New Republic, but an evil chairman breaks the peace and it leads to a bigger fight.
Well done, Senator.
Yes, most impressive.
Impressive. Most impressive.
But the way they're playing this flashback is that all these clone troopers, their friends, were killed by the Night Brother. I don't know who this person is meant to be. It's not somebody that we saw during the Clone Wars, because they do that a lot. Like, they'll just bring characters that you saw during animation into live action, especially in flashbacks. But the tattoos scream Night Brother, even though he's not a Zabrak, and I don't recall seeing a lot of non-Zabraks who were Night Brothers. Annie is wielding a very cool double-bladed lightsaber that's giving a lot of Darth Maul vibes, but it's a different type of double-bladed staff lightsaber, like more of a staff than Darth Maul's double-bladed lightsaber was. My early assumption is that it functions this way so that it's harder for the Jedi to cut it in half, which is what happened during The Phantom Menace. They just sliced Darth Maul's double-bladed lightsaber in half with their lightsabers, but it's harder to do that because of the energy portion between the two halves of the blade. Night Brothers, Sith acolytes, fighting smarter, not harder. One of the other interesting details during this 2-on-1 fight is that Ahsoka is only using one of her lightsabers two-handed, not both of the lightsabers, probably because he's using his lightsabers in a staff configuration, so she needs more force behind one lightsaber. One of the weaknesses of someone like Ahsoka using two lightsabers is that her strikes are weaker, even though she's able to do much more damage potentially, so it's harder to fight someone with like a really heavy weapon. So teeny tiny little Ahsoka needs all the extra power behind her strikes that she can get, which is why she needs to use two hands on one blade. Anakin, to his credit, is almost at his most powerful that he ever was at this point, pre-fall. So the idea is that he could probably kill this guy as easily as he wanted to, like 2 seconds flat, and he's done. But Anakin is also trying to teach Ahsoka as his Padawan, so that's why they're going through these steps here. Like, otherwise he would just do this himself. We get a little more voiceover from Force Ghost Anakin talking to Ahsoka in one of her visions, saying, "I'm always walking by your side," making it sound like he's always been watching over her all these different years, and it just made himself known inside the world between worlds during the events of Episode 1. Because the way they played that scene is the first time she'd seen Force Ghost Anakin almost forever since he eventually redeemed himself at the end of Return of the Jedi. That's one of the other problems, is that there's just so much unknown timeline for Ahsoka during that period. We don't really know what was going on with Force Ghost Anakin during that period either. Based on everything we've seen so far, we see him at the end of Return of the Jedi show up as a Force Ghost to Luke Skywalker, then we don't see him again until Ahsoka Season 1 in the World Between Worlds when Ahsoka sees him. So what was Anakin doing that whole time, and what does it have to do with Mortis? Because it probably has something to do with Mortis. Most of their scenes from the rest of this trailer with Anakin talking to older Ahsoka have to do with the Mortis subplot during Season 2 in Baylan Skoll trying to get to Mortis. We get more voiceover from Thrawn on his Chimera Star Destroyer on Dathomir, marshaling all of his forces and broadcasting to the entire galaxy that he has returned, also meant to be a call to the Imperial Remnant to let them know that he's also back. Please get your butt and all of your fleets to Dathomir so that we can marshal an army to fight the New Republic. You also notice in this close-up shot that they've tuned his visual effects, his makeup effects, and it looks way better than Thrawn during Season 1. We see Hera, Ezra Bridger, and that really ornery senator from Season 1. Not sure where they're heading here, but they're in their space flight suits, so it seems like they're about to head to Dathomir too, because there are a lot of scenes of Ezra Bridger fighting Enoch and the other Night Troopers, the Night Brothers, the Night Sisters on Dathomir. Then there are a ton of Easter eggs in Thrawn's office here, most of them carryovers from Star Wars Rebels inside his office. We saw a lot of Easter eggs during that, and I think they're just carrying that forward.
I must be unmasked quickly, as I'm on the verge of locating the rebel base in this sector.
Some of them are very obvious, but there's also a portion of the wall behind him that's completely obscured, so I'm assuming there are more Easter eggs from his office in Rebels that are behind him that we just can't see in the actual frame. Going around the horn, all like the crazy stuff that was inside his office was the Holy Grail from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is non-Star Wars technically, but there were also some comics that canonized Indiana Jones saying that it was just the future of the Star Wars universe, which was meant to pay off the idea that Star Wars is a tale that takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, so Indiana Jones is closer to present day, so technically Star Wars would be his past. He wound up finding the wreckage of the Millennium Falcon that was just thousands and thousands of years old, so make all the jokes because Harrison Ford to another Harrison Ford character. During Andor Season 2, they also had the stones from Temple of Doom in Luthen Rael's office, so there are Indiana Jones Easter eggs that appear in Star Wars all the time. One of the other biggest, most obvious Easter eggs are the two Salamiri sculptures, which is another recanonization from Dave Filoni when he brought Thrawn back for Rebels a number of years ago. During the original Thrawn trilogy in the books in the 90s, he used them to create an anti-force protective bubble around himself that would negate Luke Skywalker, other Jedi's abilities, and also use it to block them from reading his mind. This tablet, I believe, is meant to be from the World Between Worlds tablet, like the one we saw in Luthen Rael's office during Andor, but it's not the exact same tablet. There were many episodes later on during Rebels where Thrawn was trying to make it into the World Between Worlds, like he's obsessed with the Force, just on like really intellectual level, just because it's a great source of power that he can use to his advantage. There's some kind of tea set, 2 cups in a larger pot, but it doesn't look similar to the pot that Luthen Rael had in his office. There's some kind of larger bell-shaped artifact. There's a Jedi Temple Guardian mask, which he also had in his office during Rebels. There's a lightsaber hilt. He also had Hera's Kalikori, a prized Twi'lek family heirloom taken from Ryloth, but it belonged to Hera specifically when she was a child. There was also a clone trooper helmet that looked a lot like Grease. He was a clone trooper who was killed by Yoda on Kashyyyk during the Clone Wars. That we don't see it in frame, but in his original office, and it might be somewhere in the background here, there was a digital recreation of a real-life artwork done by Ralph McQuarrie, which was used by Rebels crew to create the main planet of Lothal. Here's the actual painting that it was based on. A lot of Rebels was based on Ralph McQuarrie's original concept art, like Zeb was the original Ralph McQuarrie concept for what became Chewbacca in the original Star Wars movies. Speaking of which, we finally see Zeb reunited with the Ghost Crew. There were a lot of questions about that too, because he didn't appear during Season 1, but he appeared all over Mando, and he was in the Mandalorian Grogu movie. So Ahsoka Season 2, they're getting the whole Ghost Crew back together. We'll see if there are any other Ghost Crew members that show up during them. There are a whole bunch of regular Star Destroyers that haven't been modified that pull up because they're from the Imperial Remnant that have come to join Thrawn. You can tell which Star Destroyer it is based on how much has been modified because his Chimera Star Destroyer still has the giant hyperdrive engines all around it in that ring, and it's been heavily modified in the front too. There are canon in-universe reasons why he had to modify it when he was in the Pretty Galaxy to fix it over time with things that were in that galaxy, but the other probably bigger reason is that so Star Wars can turn it into a toy that they can sell to you for lots of money. Like, it looks very cool, and I definitely want to buy a version of this toy. One of the biggest rules of Star Wars, rules of thumb, is that anything that can be sold as a toy will be sold as a toy, because real ones also know that yes, George Lucas made a lot of money on the Star Wars movies and franchise, but he made exponentially more money on the merchandise and toy sales from all the Star Wars movies. Then we get a really cool scene of a space battle above what seems like a blue planet. This could be Corellia, this could be Coruscant, and the TIE bombers aren't dropping actual bombs, they're dropping bombs full of Night Sisters that are boarding to try and destroy the New Republic fleet. So it's also kind of meant to be a comp to the beginning of A New Hope when the Empire boarded Princess Leia's ship. They're just doing it in a much cooler way this time.
Impressive.
You also notice when they kill a Night Sister, she seemingly vaporizes into pure green magic. Their green energy they manipulate through the Force. It's also the same green energy they use to reanimate dead bodies. So when Ahsoka killed Marok during Season 1, the green magic left his body and he just sort of collapsed into nothingness. This is kind of like a version of that. It's not totally clear who's in this tiny escape pod making their way towards Dathomir. It could be Ezra Bridger, could be somebody else. They then edit the scenes of Ahsoka in her trance talking to Force Ghost Anakin about her Force vision of the coming darkness, Thrawn, this giant galactic war happening in the main part of the galaxy. He then starts to warn her about Baylan Skoll and what he's trying to do with Mortis while they cut it with footage of the battle in the main galaxy. This one with the Night Mothers, the Night Troopers, Night Sisters, Thrawn's second-in-command Night Trooper, he was named Enoch, all preparing to actually fight. We get our first shot in the trailer of Ahsoka with Sabine preparing to make it into the Force Temple to learn where the entrance to Mortis is. I think that's the idea in this Night Sister temple, that they're looking for the entrance to Mortis that Baylan Skoll found at the end of Season 1 when he was standing on the Father's statue. But here's the thing, I actually think that the temple itself that they're inside in all these different scenes is just inside the statue of the Father, and they start in the base and they just work their way up to the head, and that's where it actually points the way, like literally points the way, because the Father's statue is literally pointing the way towards this signal that Baylan Skoll saw at the end of Season 1, and I think that's meant to be the entrance to Mortis on the planet. Then this very cool space battle happening between the New Republic, the Mon Calamari ships, all the Republic ships, as well as Thrawn's Star Destroyer, the Chimera, his other Star Destroyers, is meant to be Admiral Akbar fighting Thrawn. So the two best military commanders in the history of the galaxy will have a giant space battle this season. Next to all the Anakin Skywalker Mortis stuff they're doing this season, this is probably one of my other most hyped moments, is seeing their big military strategies go against each other. You also notice when Ahsoka uses the Force to open the base of the temple here, the door seems very yin-yang coded. They cut Force Ghost Anakin's voiceover talking to Ahsoka about the danger of what Baylan Skoll is trying to do with Mortis, with footage of him as the recast Rory McCann playing the character now in Shin waiting for Ahsoka's ship in the snow here. So the other really big thing this season, and I talked about this in my previous videos, is that Rory McCann is now the recast version of Baylan Skoll because Ray Stevenson passed away after the events of Season 1. May he rest in peace. But the other really cool coincidence is that Rory McCann said that he's actually the real-life good friend of Ray Stevenson, so it's sort of like your best friend taking over a role for you if something happened to you. So this is like the best possible situation. I'm sure he'll be a great version of the character. He was hardcore on Game of Thrones. And the whole reason why Dave Filoni found him specifically is because he was actually up for a role during Andor. He didn't say which role he was going to play, but they just decided that this would be a better role for him to play instead of the role on Andor. Everything that Anakin is telling Ahsoka about knowledge of a power, he's talking about the Mortis gods. If you remember during the original Mortis episodes, the whole idea is that the Father was trying to tell Anakin that he was meant to eventually replace him and the Mortis gods. So I think the idea is that they might want to set up that Anakin might become one of the new Force gods, one of the new Mortis gods during this series. One of the other important details he reveals in his warning is the power to stop wars, which also is a bad thing too, because the Mortis gods were the essence, the aspects of the Force, light side, dark side, and balance between. So if Baylan Skoll can gain that power for himself, he could potentially wipe the entire galaxy. We also get an interesting scene where you hear Shin screaming for him, Master, Master, so that might be a situation where she actually rebels against Baylan Skoll. Like Baylan Skoll goes off the rails and she decides to actually help Ahsoka and Sabine, because whatever he's doing just goes way too far. We then get that scene with Ahsoka unlocking the next steps to the entrance to Mortis inside this temple. And like I said, the two eyes in front here just seem like this is inside the head of the father. And it's like literally pointing the way towards the entrance to Mortis. Chopper comes back. Of course, they're not going to do a new season without Chopper committing all kinds of war crimes. Then we get an interesting scene of Ahsoka talking about how she left the Jedi Order to Sabine during the events of the Clone Wars series. She rightfully left, like they definitely did her dirty. But in present day, Force Ghost Anakin also asks her, you need to decide whether or not you're a Jedi, because it's been a long question, and the real answer so far has been that Ahsoka technically is not a Jedi, because a Jedi is part of the Jedi Order. She's just a very powerful Force user that sort of practices her own way through the Force. On the other side of the equation is sort of the difference between a dark Jedi and a Sith. Like a Sith is a very specific type of order that practices dark side of the Force, and somebody who's the dark side of the Force in another type of way that doesn't necessarily believe the same things that Sith believe is just a dark sider. It's totally the same principle with the Night Sisters, like they're their own separate faction, completely different from the Jedi, the Sith, or other dark side Force users. They just use the Force in their own way, both light side and dark side. We get a much bigger battle between Ezra Bridger and all the Night Troopers, the Night Brothers, and the Night Sisters on Dathomir. We also get a really cool look at him using his new lightsaber, because remember he had to make a new lightsaber because Sabine is using his old lightsaber from the events of Rebels. Fighting against Enoch, who's also using another Force weapon. It's like the special bladed Force weapon. Anakin tells Ahsoka that this whole Mortis subplot during Season 2 is her new big trial that she has to face. And we get this really cool scene of Ahsoka and Sabine at night fighting these robots on the Night Sisters' Peridia planet, and they're giving a lot of vibes of the robots from Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky. We get a really cool scene of Hu Yang using a bunch of different lightsabers, very General Grievous coded, but also Hu Yang is sort of the master of constructing lightsabers. That's the other joke here too, is that he has thousands of lightsabers on the ship. He is meant to be thousands of years old. He's been teaching Jedi how to construct lightsabers since the beginning of the Jedi Order. We get a really quick scene of the Ghost in the middle of that giant space battle between Akbar and Thrawn. And they end the trailer with them in what I think is the base of the statue of the Father, like the first entrance when they walk into the actual temple itself, and they're fighting those same Studio Ghibli Castle in the Sky robots, but the blades that they're using might be Catorsis weave blades because they seem strong against their lightsaber strikes. So like I said, the vibe here is that they make it into the temple, it's in the base of the statue of the Father, and they just fight their way to the top of the head of the Father that literally points the way to Mortis. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below and let me know if you spotted any Easter eggs or references in the trailer that I didn't talk about in the video. There were many other trailers at D23 for Marvel, for other big stuff. I try to do videos for everything. I'm still in the middle of working on a couple of the leaked trailers too. Like there's a Star Wars Starfighter trailer that leaked out. I'll try to do video for that soon. There's also a bunch of other stuff that I haven't gotten to yet, so be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss anything. Everybody click here for my new Avengers Doomsday trailer from D23, and click here for my big X-Men 2028 teaser. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.